Yeah, one of the reasons why I harp on being emotionally healthy sometimes, and for the most of the time, is that, like for real, we really do need to understand that when you're in a relationship, um, or not necessarily being in a relationship, before you even get into the relationship, from an emotionally healthy standpoint, sometimes you just need to understand that not everybody has to agree with you. Other people's opinion is just that, their opinion. It doesn't necessarily have to agree with your opinion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be fact. And you need to be okay with whatever that is. Emotionally healthy means not always having to control the conversation. It means being able to embrace that there is a possibility that you might be wrong, and you being okay with that. And having enough maturity to understand, like, okay, I can actually learn something here. Our problem is we think we know too much. And we think we know too much, especially in marriage. And not only are you selfish, but you're emotionally unstable. So in other words, your spouse says something to you and you get bent. You've even gone to the point of stonewalling, meaning you ain't talking to them for a day, 2 days, because you got an attitude. Now, I understand if you're not speaking for a small moment in time because you need to get yourself together in order to respond, accordingly. But some of you, you're not talking to your spouse and you doing this for like 2-3 days at a time. That's foolishness. That's not only immature. Now I understand why when you read 1 Corinthians 13 and it says, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, and I thought as a child. Because in order for you to exhibit the kind of love that is expressed in 1 Corinthians 13, you got to be grown. You got to be mature. And what is maturity? It's not necessarily something that comes with age. It is taking responsibility for the way you think, the way you act, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to situations, right? The word declares, whatsoever a man thinketh, so is he. So if you're thinking immature thoughts, then chances are it's because you immature. And so what I would say is that, for real, selfishness plus emotions equal disaster. I'm gonna say it one more time. If you selfish and you couple that with your emotions, the end result is disaster. Why? Because number one, there are some situations, let's just take it for a minor disagreement. The disagreement is on a 3 and you coming in with your emotions at an 8. Your emotions are higher than what the situation called for, and your spouse is stepping back like, whoa, what just happened here? How did we get here? We got here because your emotions were higher than the situation called for. And that is what I'm talking about in terms of emotional instability. Then of course you put that selfishness in there, and that's a whole nother beast altogether. And like I said, selfishness is when you're looking at any situation only from your perspective. And you married? Like one accord. The two shall become one flesh. Right? So that means if the two of you shall become one flesh, or you trying to move on one accord doesn't necessarily mean that you always going to get what you want out of the deal. If one accord is the goal, then sometimes that means that you might have to let go of what you're thinking or feeling in order to achieve one accord, right? So I encourage couples, get rid of that selfishness. I'll never forget there was a story that was told one time of a guy who was getting beat at chess. And he was like, I know this guy can't beat me at chess, so why am I losing? So what he did was he got up from his seat, he went around to the other side of the table to get a different perspective of what was going on in the game from his opponent's viewpoint. It clicked for him. He came back around, sat at his seat, and then he ended up winning the tournament. Why? Because he got an opportunity to look at the game from somebody else's perspective. And I'm saying in a lot of your marriages, you are not looking at the situation from your spouse's perspective. And as long as you do that, you're going to end up losing, not only in that moment, but you're going to end up losing in the long run. Straight up, you're just going to end up losing, right? So remember what the communication is in marriage. I think I've spoken on this before, is the fact that there's 2 parts to the communication. Number one, it's an exchange, meaning you talk, your spouse listen, right? And then your spouse talk and you listen. It's an exchange, but when the two of you are trying to communicate at the same time, there's no resolution, right? So effective communication from the verbal standpoint, right? You're always speaking to inspire and encourage your spouse to be and do their best, right? And then there's the effective listening part, where you're listening to find understanding and meaning not only in what's actually being said by your spouse, but in who they are as a person, right? Finding meaning not only in what's being said, but who they are as a person. So do me a favor. Here's the equation. Selfishness plus emotion get you disaster. But when you give, and I can't talk about marriage without talking about God because it's a reflection of our relationship with Him. The word declares that when you give, it shall be given back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over with good measure. And that's across the board. A lot of time we don't claim the promises for inside the marriage. So if you want to win, do me a favor. Start understanding your spouse, not only for what they're saying, but who they are as a person. And do me a favor. Put selfishness in front of this firing squad and dunk. You feel me? And you're going to win.